Avery Callahan, 27, stared at the empty garage space where her beloved 1967 Mustang should have been. The car she'd spent 5 years restoring was gone, sold by her parents without her permission, all to fund her sister Brooke's luxury healing retreat in Sedona. What her family didn't know was that this betrayal would be the final straw in a lifetime of sacrifices. 3 months later, when Brooke's wedding day arrived, Avery walked in with evidence that would shatter the perfect family facade forever. Before I dive deeper into how my family's betrayal changed everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever felt like the family scapegoat while someone else gets all the glory, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family, karma, and justice served. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this all unfolds. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. From the moment my sister Brooke was born when I was 3, it became clear that I, Avery Callahan, would forever be playing second fiddle. Our family photo albums told the story better than words ever could, pages dedicated to Brooke's dance recitals and school awards, with my achievements relegated to the occasional group shot where I stood in the background, my smile never quite reaching my eyes. Our parents, Carol and Richard, weren't deliberately cruel. They simply operated under the unspoken belief that Brooke needed more attention, more resources, more protection. "Your sister is sensitive," Mom would say, whenever I complained about the imbalance. "You're the strong one, Avery. You can handle things better." And handle things I did. When I was 12, I saved for 6 months to buy a new mountain bike, only to have it given to Brooke when she suddenly developed an interest in cycling. "You can use your old bike a little longer," Dad reasoned. "Your sister needs encouragement to develop her interests." The pattern continued with my first laptop, my prom dress fund, even my college savings. "We had to borrow from your college fund for Brooke's dance competition in New York," Mom explained during my senior year of high school. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her. You understand, right? You can take out loans, you're so responsible with money." I remember standing in our kitchen clutching my acceptance letter to Northwestern, the partial scholarship not enough to cover what was now missing from my fund. I nodded, swallowing the bitter pill of being the responsible one yet again. Meanwhile, Brooke flunked out of 3 colleges, each more expensive than the last, with our parents always ready to finance her next passion. The emotional toll of being the family shock absorber was crushing. While Brooke could throw tantrums over minor inconveniences, I wasn't allowed to express disappointment without being labeled dramatic or selfish. When I got promoted at my marketing firm at 24, my parents spent 5 minutes congratulating me before launching into an hour-long discussion of Brooke's latest crisis, being passed over for a part in a local theater production. The only person who ever treated me as though I mattered equally was my grandfather, Harold. Mom's father was a retired mechanic who saw something in me that my parents missed: a determined spirit and a mind that understood how things worked. When I turned 16, he started teaching me about car restoration in his cluttered garage that smelled of motor oil and possibility. "Cars don't play favorites, Avery," he told me once while we were elbow deep in an engine. "They respond to patience, knowledge, and respect." Remember that about people too. When Grandpa Harold passed away during my senior year of college, he left me a small inheritance, enough for a down payment on an apartment or graduate school, or a sensible investment. Instead, I used it to buy a rusted 1967 Mustang that barely ran, much to my parents' dismay. "This is what you're wasting your inheritance on?" Dad had asked, staring at the dilapidated vehicle. "Brooke could use help with her student loans." But for once I stood firm. "This is mine," I said, simply. And for 5 years that car became my sanctuary. Every spare dollar and weekend went into restoring it, sourcing original parts, learning to do the bodywork myself, painstakingly rebuilding the engine until it purred like it had just rolled off the assembly line. The Mustang represented everything I'd never had in my family: autonomy, recognition for my efforts, and a space that was unquestionably mine. When I finally completed the restoration, the metallic blue paint gleaming under the Portland sun, even my parents had to admit it was impressive. "I never thought you'd actually finish it," Mom said, which was as close to a compliment as I was likely to get. The car was more than a vehicle to me. It was tangible proof that I could create something valuable, something beautiful, without having to sacrifice it for someone else's benefit. At least that's what I believed, until I returned from that fateful business trip and found an empty space where my heart and soul had been parked. I remember the exact moment I realized what had happened. After a 2-week business trip to Chicago, I'd taken an Uber directly from the airport to my grandfather's old house, which I'd inherited after my grandmother passed last year. I didn't live there, I rented it out to help cover the property taxes, but I kept the garage for my Mustang, unwilling to leave it on the street outside my apartment. I'd been eager to take the car for a drive after being away, maybe cruise down the coast with the windows down, letting the spring air clear my mind of spreadsheets and client presentations. Instead, I found myself staring at an empty garage, the outline of oil stains on the concrete, the only evidence my car had ever existed. My first thought was theft, my fingers already dialing 911, when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Hope your flight was good. Come over for dinner tonight. Dad made your favorite lasagna." Something about the casual tone, the normalcy of it, stopped me. I lowered the phone and called my father instead. "Dad, the Mustang is gone. I think it's been stolen." The pause before he answered told me everything. "Oh, that. We were going to tell you tonight at dinner. We sold it." The world tilted sideways. "You what now, Avery? Don't overreact. Brooke needed help, and you know our retirement fund took a hit last year. That car was just sitting there most of the time anyway." I struggled to form words through the rage constricting my throat. "You had no right. That was my property. Technically, the title was in my name for the insurance, remember?" His voice had that patronizing tone he used whenever he thought I was being unreasonable. "Look, Brooke had a terrible breakup with Jason. She's been devastated, barely eating. The therapist recommended this healing retreat in Sedona, very exclusive, very effective, but it needed to be paid in full right away to secure a spot. So you sold my car," I was screaming now, pacing the empty garage. "We'll make it up to you," he said dismissively. "You can use your mother's car whenever you need to. Come to dinner and we'll talk about it." I hung up without answering, and sank to the oil-stained floor, my back against the wall where my tools used to hang. The tools were gone too, I realized, probably thrown in as part of the deal. That evening, against my better judgment, I went to my parents' house. I needed to see their faces when I confronted them, needed to understand how they could betray me so completely. Dinner was surreal. Mom served lasagna like it was any normal family meal. Dad poured wine, and Brooke, the cause of my current devastation, was scrolling through her phone at the table, a behavior that would have earned me a lecture about manners. "There she is," Mom smiled as if nothing was wrong. "We missed you, honey." I remained standing in the doorway. "Where's my car?" Mom's smile faltered. "Oh, Avery, let's eat first and then—" "No. I want to know who you sold it to. I want to try to buy it back." Dad sighed heavily. "That's not possible. It went to a collector in California. The deal is done. How much did you get?" My voice was eerily calm now. My parents exchanged glances, enough to cover Brooke's retreat, and some left over for a few expenses, Dad said vaguely. Brooke finally looked up from her phone. "Oh my God, are you still going on about that old car? You should see the amazing place I'm going to." She thrust her phone toward me, showing photos of a luxury desert resort with infinity pools and red rock views. "It's going to totally change my life after what Jason did." I took the phone from her hands and swiped through the pictures: private villa accommodations, spa services, guided meditation sessions in between yoga and gourmet meals. "This isn't a healing retreat," I said flatly. "This is a 5-star vacation. It's a holistic wellness experience," Brooke countered, snatching her phone back. "My therapist says I need space to process my trauma." "What trauma?" "Jason broke up with you." People break up every day without needing a spa vacation funded by stealing from their siblings. "We didn't steal," Mom began. "Yes, you did," I cut her off. "That car was mine. I bought it with Grandpa's money. I restored it with my own hands, and it was worth at least $40,000 in its condition." "That's theft." "Now you're just being materialistic," Brooke scoffed. "It's a car, not a person. My mental health is at stake here." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something I'd been missing for years. The calculated way she dabbed at dry eyes, the subtle manipulation in her trembling lower lip, the practiced vulnerability. This wasn't genuine pain. This was a performance she'd been refining her entire life. "How convenient that your mental health crises always require expensive solutions," I said quietly. "And how convenient that they always seem to come at my expense." I walked out of my parents' house that night with a clarity I'd never felt before. This wasn't a one-time betrayal, it was simply the most egregious example of a lifetime pattern. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped playing my assigned role in the family drama. 2 weeks later, Brooke announced her engagement to Marcus, a man none of us had met, with a massive diamond sparkling on her finger. The devastating breakup with Jason apparently forgotten, she was now planning the wedding of the century, and already hinting about how much her big sister would want to contribute to make her day special. But something had shifted inside me. As I smiled and congratulated her, a plan was already forming in my mind. This time things would be different. This time there would be consequences. The first step was methodical documentation. I created a spreadsheet detailing every financial sacrifice I'd made for Brooke over the years: the diverted college funds, the borrowed items never returned, the loans never repaid. Conservative estimates put the total well over $70,000, not including the Mustang. Each entry reinforced what I already knew: this wasn't normal family give and take. This was exploitation. But I needed more than just my own recollections. I needed outside perspectives, starting with the person who supposedly triggered this latest crisis. Finding Jason wasn't difficult. We had mutual friends, and he agreed to meet me for coffee with surprising enthusiasm. "I've been wanting to talk to someone in your family who might actually listen," he said, sliding into the booth across from me at a downtown cafe. Jason looked nothing like the villain Brooke had described. No signs of the emotional manipulator or pathological liar she'd labeled him. Just a tired-looking graphic designer with kind eyes. "I need to understand what happened between you and Brooke," I said directly. Jason's laugh was hollow. "Which version do you want, the one she told your family, or the truth?" The truth, it turned out, was that Jason had discovered Brooke had been using his credit card without permission, racking up thousands in charges while they were living together. When confronted, she'd threatened to tell people he was abusive if he went public with her theft. "I just wanted a clean break," he explained. "But then I started getting texts from mutual friends saying I'd cheated on her, that I'd emptied our joint account, lies, all of it. I had to show people my bank statements to prove I wasn't the monster she described." I felt sick. "When exactly did you break up?" "January 15th. I pulled out my phone and showed him the resort pictures. "This is where she went for her healing in early April." Jason squinted at the images, then his eyes widened. "Is that Marcus in the background?" By the pool, I zoomed in on the photo I hadn't examined closely before. There, lounging on a cabana bed, was unmistakably the same man who was now Brooke's fiancé. "They were dating in January," Jason said quietly. "That's why I broke up with her. I found texts between them going back months." A cold realization washed over me. "She didn't go on this retreat because of your breakup." She went on a romantic getaway with her affair partner funded by my car. After meeting with Jason, I expanded my investigation. I reached out to cousins, aunts, uncles, anyone who might have experienced Brooke's manipulative side. The stories poured in, each more troubling than the last. Cousin Emma revealed that Brooke had borrowed her identity to open a credit card during college, nearly ruining Emma's credit score. Uncle Pete admitted that the emergency loan he'd given Brooke for medical bills had actually funded a cosmetic procedure. Aunt Sarah confessed she'd stopped attending family functions because she couldn't stand watching my parents enable Brooke's behavior while I was constantly overlooked. "We've all seen it for years," Avery Aunt Sarah told me over the phone. "But your parents shut down anyone who tries to point it out. They're so invested in the narrative of Brooke as this fragile flower that they can't see the damage they're causing to her, to you, to themselves." The most disturbing discovery came when I used my marketing firm's subscription to a background check service. What I found sent chills down my spine. 3 credit cards opened in my parents' names, all linked to addresses Brooke had lived at, all carrying balances near their limits. I doubted my parents had any idea. Then there was Marcus, the mysterious fiancé. According to social media, he came from the Wellington family, as in Wellington Developments, one of the largest real estate companies on the West Coast. His father was worth millions, a fact Brooke had conveniently failed to mention when asking our parents to fund pre-wedding expenses. She said his family is contributing nothing, Mom had explained, when telling me about the second mortgage they were considering to pay for Brooke's dream venue. Apparently there's some family rift, and Marcus is estranged from his parents. A few strategic LinkedIn messages and a phone call to Marcus's sister proved this was another fabrication. The Wellingtons had offered to pay for the entire wedding at their country club, but Brooke had insisted on a more authentic celebration funded primarily by her family. "Marcus thinks your parents are excited to host the wedding," his sister Charlotte told me. "He has no idea they're going into debt for it. That doesn't sound like my brother, he'd be horrified." The spreadsheet of financial and emotional abuse grew longer with each conversation, as did my moral dilemma. Family loyalty had been ingrained in me since childhood, but at what cost? How much of myself was I willing to sacrifice on the altar of keeping peace? The breaking point came when I discovered through a carelessly discarded receipt in my parents' kitchen that they had cashed out part of their $401k to pay for Brooke's wedding, incurring substantial penalties in the process. They were both in their 60s with retirement rapidly approaching, and they were decimating their safety net for Brooke's one-day spectacle. That night I sat in my apartment, surrounded by evidence of years of deception, facing an uncomfortable truth. Silence wasn't kindness, it was complicity. By allowing this dynamic to continue unchallenged, I wasn't just hurting myself. I was enabling a cycle that would eventually destroy our entire family. It was time for the truth to come out. The only question was when and how to deliver it for maximum impact and minimum denial. I needed irrefutable evidence and the perfect moment when everyone involved would be forced to listen. 3 days later, Brooke called to ask me to be her maid of honor. As I accepted the role with feigned enthusiasm, I knew exactly when I would finally break my silence. "The lavender bridesmaid dresses are non-negotiable," Brooke declared, pacing around the upscale bridal boutique, while 5 of us stood awkwardly on pedestals in various states of discomfort. "I don't care if they're unflattering. It's my vision." The dress in question cost $450, a special price Brooke had supposedly negotiated for us. Later, when the consultant stepped away, I glimpsed the actual invoice on her tablet, $300 per dress, with Brooke pocketing the difference from her bridesmaids. This was just one of countless indignities leading up to the wedding. Despite everything I discovered, I was playing my part perfectly. The devoted sister, the efficient maid of honor, the family peacekeeper. Each smile felt like a betrayal of myself, but I needed to maintain the facade until I had every piece in place. Don't forget you're hosting the bridal shower next month, Brooke reminded me as we left the boutique. Nothing extravagant, just 30 people. Oh, and Mom mentioned you're handling the rehearsal dinner too. I nodded pleasantly while mentally adding these unexpected expenses to my spreadsheet. The total my family owed me was approaching 6 figures, yet here I was being asked to contribute more. Marcus's parents still aren't contributing, I asked innocently. Brooke's expression flickered. They're so toxic, Av. The less involvement from them the better. That's too bad. I was looking at Marcus's family online. Their estate would be a gorgeous wedding venue. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Why were you looking them up? I shrugged. Just curious about my future brother-in-law. His sister Charlotte seems nice. The name drop was deliberate, and the panic that flashed across Brooke's face confirmed my suspicions. She had no idea I'd been in contact with Marcus's family. You talked to Charlotte, her voice rose an octave. Not yet, I lied smoothly. But I thought I might reach out, sister to sister, you know, unless there's a reason I shouldn't. Brooke backpedaled quickly. No, I mean they're just very private people. Let me handle the Wellington side of things. That evening I met Marcus for coffee, ostensibly to discuss surprise wedding gifts for Brooke, but really to gauge how much he knew about the financial arrangements. Marcus Wellington was genuinely likable, intelligent, down to earth, despite his wealthy background, and clearly besotted with the version of Brooke he thought he knew. As we talked, it became increasingly clear he had no idea about the financial strain his wedding was causing my parents. Brooke insisted on doing it this way, he explained, when I carefully broached the subject. I told her my parents would happily host at their estate, but she said your parents had been dreaming of giving her this wedding for years. He smiled warmly. She talks about how close your family is, how you all support each other. It's one of the things I love about her. She comes from such a nurturing background, unlike the competitive environment I grew up in. The irony was almost too much to bear. What else has Brooke told you about our family? His answer confirmed my worst fears. In Brooke's narrative to her fiancé, I was the unstable sister with a history of jealousy and attention-seeking behavior. My parents were saints who had supported both daughters equally, while I repeatedly squandered opportunities due to my issues. She really admires how you're trying to get your life together now, Marcus said, with such sincere encouragement that I couldn't even be angry at him. The marketing job, staying sober, reconnecting with the family after everything. She's really proud of you. I had never had a drinking problem. I had never been estranged from my family. I had never needed to get my life together, because it had never fallen apart. But in Brooke's carefully constructed reality, she needed me to be the damaged one to maintain her role as the golden child. Has Brooke mentioned my car? I asked suddenly. Marcus looked confused. Your car? No, I don't think so. Never mind, not important. I smiled and changed the subject. 2 weeks before the wedding, Brooke's bachelorette party in Vegas provided more pieces to the puzzle. While Brooke was receiving a poolside massage, her bridesmaids, mostly childhood friends and cousins, began reminiscing about past antics. Remember when she convinced her parents that Avery damaged that rental car in Cabo? One friend laughed. When we all saw her back into that pole, another chimed in. Or when she borrowed your designer bag for that job interview, Avery, and returned it with wine stains, and somehow made your mom think you'd loaned it to her already damaged. They spoke casually as if these deceptions were amusing anecdotes rather than evidence of a disturbing pattern. When they realized I wasn't laughing along, an uncomfortable silence fell over the cabana. She doesn't mean anything by it, her friend, Zoe, finally said. It's just how Brooke operates. She's always been able to wrap people around her finger. Not anymore, I said quietly. The moral weight of what I was planning pressed heavier with each passing day. Was I doing the right thing by exposing everything at the wedding? Would this destroy my family rather than heal it? The evidence folder on my laptop grew, but so did my doubts. 3 days before the wedding, I drove to my grandfather's old house, my house now, and sat in the empty garage where my Mustang used to be. The space still held the ghosts of my passion project, the countless hours of work and love, invested in something that had been taken from me without a second thought. I called the one person who might understand my grandfather's brother, Great-Uncle Frank, who had always seen through the family dynamics with crystal clarity. "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," I admitted after explaining my plan. "Maybe I should just let it go for my parents' sake if nothing else." Uncle Frank was silent for a long moment before responding. "You know, Avery, there's something Harold used to say about engines. He'd say, if you hear a knocking sound, you can turn up the radio to drown it out, but that won't stop the engine from eventually failing. Your family's got a knocking sound that's been ignored for decades. So you think I should go through with it? I think the damage is already done. The question now is whether anyone's going to acknowledge it and make repairs, or if you're all going to keep pretending everything's fine until the whole thing breaks down beyond fixing." His words stayed with me as I finalized my presentation, a digital and physical folder containing irrefutable evidence of years of manipulation, complete with testimonials, financial records, and a timeline of Brooke's most egregious deceptions. I wasn't doing this out of revenge, I reminded myself. This was an intervention, the only way to force my family to see what we had become. The night before the wedding, my parents hosted the rehearsal dinner at an expensive restaurant I knew they couldn't afford. As Brooke held court accepting compliments and gifts with practiced humility, I watched my father discreetly check the balance on his credit card before ordering another round of champagne he couldn't pay for. My mother looked tired, the weight of financial stress evident in the new lines around her eyes. They were mortgaging their future for a daughter who had been lying to them for years, while I sat silently with the truth locked inside a folder in my purse. The weight of tomorrow's confrontation kept me awake all night, wondering if I was about to commit an unforgivable act or a necessary one. I was standing at a crossroads with my sister's wedding just days away, and a folder full of evidence that could destroy everything. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping peace and standing up for yourself? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. If you're invested in what happens next, smash that like button and subscribe for the next part of this family drama. The wedding day reveal is something you won't want to miss. The morning of the wedding dawned with picture-perfect weather, sunny skies, and mild temperatures, as if nature itself was conspiring to create Brooke's flawless day. I stood in the bridal suite of the upscale Portland hotel, watching makeup artists and hairstylists flutter around my sister while she directed everyone with imperious precision. "Avery, your hair needs more volume," Brooke critiqued as she glanced at me between sips of champagne. "And make sure your makeup isn't too dramatic. I don't want you standing out in the photos." I smiled tightly, my bridesmaid dress hanging nearby, the unflattering lavender monstrosity that had cost me $450. Beneath it, partially hidden in my tote bag, was a manila folder containing everything I'd discovered. My heart pounded as I thought about what would unfold in just a few hours. "Earth to Avery." Brooke snapped her fingers in front of my face. "I need you to check if Mom has the something borrowed bracelet. And remind Dad he needs to take his emotional support medication before the ceremony. I can't have him crying through the whole thing." As I left the suite on my assigned errand, I remembered the conversation I'd had with my parents the night before. They'd pulled me aside after the rehearsal dinner, their faces drawn with worry. "Honey, we hate to ask," Mom had begun hesitantly, "but there's been a problem with the venue payment. They're saying the final installment is due before the ceremony." Dad jumped in. "It's just temporary, our home equity line hasn't finalized yet. Could you put it on your credit card, just until next week?" The amount they named would have maxed out my card completely, leaving me financially vulnerable right when I was planning to potentially alienate my entire family. The irony wasn't lost on me. "What about the money from my car?" I'd asked quietly. Their uncomfortable glances at each other confirmed what I'd already suspected. The money was long gone, with nothing to show for it but Brooke's Instagram photos from her healing retreat with Marcus. Now, as I headed to find my parents, I carried not just the folder of evidence but the weight of years of similar conversations, similar expectations, similar sacrifices, all flowing in one direction. I found my mother in the hotel lobby directing flower deliveries with military precision. "Mom, Brooke's asking about the bracelet." "Oh, it's right here." She patted her purse. "And remind your father about his medication." "I know." I hesitated, then asked, "Are you sure about all this, Mom? The second mortgage, the credit card debt. It's a lot for one day." She straightened a nearby flower arrangement. "Your sister deserves her dream wedding, Avery. When it's your turn, we'll do the same for you." But we both knew that wasn't true. There would be nothing left by the time my turn came, no equity in the house, no retirement savings, to tap, nothing but exhausted credit lines and empty promises. The ceremony itself was a blur of perfection. Brooke was radiant in her designer gown, my father proud as he walked her down the aisle despite the cost that was crushing him. Marcus beamed from the altar, still blissfully unaware of the financial chaos swirling around his bride's family. I followed behind with the other bridesmaids, the folder now tucked into a decorative clutch that matched my dress. As I took my place at the altar, I caught sight of Uncle Frank in the audience. He gave me a subtle nod, both acknowledgement and permission. Beside him sat several of my cousins who had contributed to my evidence folder, their expressions solemn. They knew what might be coming. The vows were exchanged, the rings presented, the kiss shared to enthusiastic applause. Through it all, I focused on breathing steadily, reminding myself that what I was about to do wasn't about revenge, it was about truth, long overdue. The reception began in the hotel's grand ballroom, a space that cost more for 6 hours than my monthly rent. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables adorned with arrangements of out-of-season flowers, each centerpiece representing hours of my mother's overtime work. The 5-tier cake in the corner had been funded by my father cashing in a life insurance policy. After dinner, my parents gave their speeches, both of them praising Brooke's strength, her resilience, her special light. My father's voice cracked with emotion as he raised his glass. "No parents could be prouder than we are of our beautiful daughter. We'd sacrifice anything for her happiness." He had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. Then it was my turn, the maid of honor speech. The moment of truth. I approached the microphone slowly, the folder clutched in my sweating hands. The room quieted as I looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some strangers, all expectant. Brooke sat beside Marcus at the head table, her smile confident, secure in the knowledge that I would follow the script as I always had. "For those who don't know me, I'm Avery, Brooke's older sister," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've been asked to share some thoughts about the bride on her special day." I paused, looking directly at my sister. Most maid of honor speeches talk about childhood memories, inside jokes, the journey of watching your sister fall in love. But I want to talk about something different today. I want to talk about patterns. A flicker of unease crossed Brooke's face. "You see, throughout our lives certain patterns emerge in families. Roles we play, dynamics we fall into. And sometimes these patterns become so familiar that we stop questioning them even when they're destroying us from the inside." I opened the folder and removed the first document, a photocopy of the title to my Mustang. 3 months ago, my parents sold my car without my permission to fund what they thought was Brooke's emergency healing retreat after a devastating breakup. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus frowned in confusion. What they didn't know, what none of us knew, was that the retreat was actually a romantic getaway with Marcus, who Brooke had been seeing for months, while still with her previous boyfriend. Gasps now. Marcus turned to Brooke, whose face had drained of color. "But this isn't just about a car or even about a deceptive vacation. It's about a lifetime of similar choices that have created a dangerous imbalance in our family. I began methodically presenting the evidence I'd gathered. The credit cards opened in my parents' names, the fabricated emergencies that always required financial solutions, the consistent pattern of my sacrifices, funding Brooke's desires. The designer dress Brooke is wearing right now, purchased with money from my parents' 401k. The venue we're sitting in, funded by a second mortgage on their home. The flowers, the cake, the string quartet, all financed by debt that will follow them into retirement. My mother had her hand over her mouth, my father's face ashen. But I continued, my voice growing stronger. And the most devastating part, Marcus's family offered to pay for the entire wedding. Brooke refused, preferring to bankrupt our parents, rather than accept money from her future in-laws. I turned to face the Wellington family seated at a prime table near the front. Did you know, your son has been told that I'm an unstable alcoholic who's just recently reconnected with the family. That's the story Brooke created to explain any potential awkwardness, not the truth that I've been systematically exploited to maintain her lifestyle. Marcus stood up abruptly. Is this true? He demanded, looking at Brooke. Her response was tears, immediate dramatic sobs that had worked so effectively in the past. She's just jealous, Brooke choked out. She's always hated me, always wanted what I have, but the spell was broken. I calmly placed financial statements, text message screenshots, and testimonials from extended family members on the table in front of her. No more gaslighting, Brooke. No more manipulation. The pattern stops today. For the next 10 minutes, the wedding reception transformed into something unprecedented, a family intervention decades in the making. Guests shifted uncomfortably as Marcus examined the evidence with growing horror. My parents' initial anger at my scene gave way to stunned silence as they confronted years of willful blindness. Brooke attempted every tactic in her arsenal: tears, accusations, dramatic exits, followed by equally dramatic returns. But with each attempt, fewer people rushed to console her. The emperor had no clothes, and finally everyone could see it. I think Marcus said eventually, his voice tight with controlled fury, that we need to have a private conversation. He took Brooke's arm firmly and led her from the ballroom, her mascara-streaked face a mask of panic as she realized her carefully constructed world was collapsing. As guests began awkwardly departing, I approached my shell-shocked parents. I'm sorry it had to happen this way, I said quietly. But it couldn't continue. You have nothing left to give her, and she was never going to stop taking. My father looked at me with tears in his eyes. How could we have been so blind? It was the first crack in the foundation of denial they had built around Brooke, the first acknowledgement that perhaps, just perhaps, they had enabled a monster of their own creation. The days following what would become known in family lore as the reception revelation were a hurricane of emotional confrontations, tearful admissions, and long overdue reckonings. Marcus postponed the honeymoon indefinitely, moving into a hotel, while he processed the extent of Brooke's deceptions. The wedding gifts were returned, the marriage license remained unfiled, and Brooke moved back into our parents' house not triumphantly as a newlywed visiting between tropical excursions, but in disgrace, her facade finally shattered. The initial aftermath was as painful as I'd feared. My mother oscillated between rage at me for ruining Brooke's special day and crushing guilt as she began to recognize her role in creating the toxic dynamic. My father retreated into silent depression as he confronted both the financial devastation and his failure to protect me from years of exploitation. Brooke predictably launched an aggressive campaign to re-establish her victim status. She called relatives in tears, claiming I had fabricated evidence out of jealousy. She created social media posts, alluding to family betrayal and standing strong against lies. She even attempted to access my apartment while I was at work, presumably to find something she could use against me, but the tide had turned. For every flying monkey Brooke dispatched, 2 family members reached out to me with their own stories of manipulation at her hands. Aunt Sarah organized a family meeting where one-by-one relatives shared experiences that painted a damning picture of the golden child's true nature. She borrowed $5,000 from me for emergency dental surgery last year, Cousin Tyler revealed. I just found out from the evidence Avery gathered that she used it for a luxury handbag shopping spree. She told me Avery had stolen money from their grandmother's purse during the funeral. Aunt Patricia added, "I've been cold to you for years because of that, Avery. I'm so sorry." The most dramatic moment came when my mother, after 2 weeks of defensive anger, found the credit card statements proving Brooke had opened accounts in her name. The $23 0 charges explained the collection calls my parents had been receiving and dismissing as mistakes. "This is fraud," Mom said quietly, her hands shaking as she examined the evidence. "Our daughter committed actual fraud against us." The statement marked a turning point. For the first time, my parents began to see Brooke not as the fragile flower who needed protection, but as an adult who had made calculated choices to exploit those who loved her. 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, we gathered for a family therapy session, my parents, Brooke and me. The therapist, Dr. Winters, had been briefed on the situation and skillfully guided us through the most difficult conversation of our lives. "I'd like to start by acknowledging that every person in this room has experienced pain," she began. "And every person has contributed in some way to the family dynamic that brought you here." For 2 hours we talked through decades of favoritism, enabling resentment and manipulation. My parents struggled to accept their role, while Brooke vacillated between tearful apologies and subtle attempts to re-establish herself as the victim. "I just needed help," she insisted. "Everyone needs help sometimes. There's a difference between needing help and systematic exploitation," Dr. Winters noted calmly. "Would you be willing to acknowledge that difference, Brooke?" The breakthrough, small but significant, came when my father finally voiced what he had never been able to admit before. "We failed you, Avery," he said, meeting my eyes directly. "We taught Brooke that her feelings mattered more than your rights. We taught you that your needs were secondary. We created this mess, and I am so deeply sorry." My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if you can ever forgive us, but I hope you'll let us try to make amends." Brooke's journey toward genuine accountability proved more challenging. While she admitted to making mistakes, she struggled with the deeper acknowledgement of her manipulative patterns. It would take 3 more therapy sessions, plus the reality of criminal charges for the credit card fraud, before she began showing signs of genuine remorse. The external consequences mounted quickly. Marcus officially called off the engagement after confirming with his family that Brooke had rejected their offers to pay for the wedding while painting them as unwilling to help. The wedding vendors, upon learning of the fraud involved in some of their payments, were pursuing legal action. And most significantly, Brooke was facing potential prosecution for identity theft and credit card fraud. In an unexpected twist, it was Marcus who offered a potential path forward. After a month of separation and several intense conversations with Brooke, he approached my parents with a proposition. "I still care about Brooke," he explained during a tense dinner at my parents' house. "I believe she can change with proper therapy and accountability. I'm willing to help with legal expenses and therapy costs under certain conditions." Those conditions included Brooke entering an intensive outpatient program for manipulative personality disorders, making financial restitution to family members she had defrauded, and signing a prenuptial agreement that would protect Marcus from future financial exploitation. And he added, looking directly at me, a complete accounting of everything taken from Avery with a plan for making it right. It was the first time anyone had prioritized justice for me over Brooke's comfort, and I found myself unexpectedly tearful at the simple acknowledgement. The process of tallying the financial and emotional debt owed to me was uncomfortable for everyone. My parents were forced to confront specific instances of favoritism they had long rationalized. while Brooke had to acknowledge the brother-in-law she nearly had might never trust her again. And I had to revisit painful memories I'd spent years trying to suppress. I don't expect to get everything back, I explained during our family session. But I do need acknowledgement. I need an end to the gaslighting, the dismissal, the expectation that I'll keep sacrificing while Brooke keeps taking. For the first time in my life, my family listened, really listened when I spoke about my feelings. It was a fragile beginning, but it was something. 3 months after the wedding day revelation, our family existed in a new reality, one built on painful truths rather than comfortable lies. The transformation wasn't immediate or simple, but it was undeniably underway. My parents facing the financial devastation of decades of enabling, Brooke made the difficult decision to sell their vacation cabin in the Cascade Mountains, a property they had once promised would be their retirement retreat. The proceeds went toward paying off the wedding debt and beginning to make restitution for my car. We found a buyer who's willing to pay fair market value, Dad told me, as we sat in their kitchen reviewing the sale paperwork. After settling the immediate debts, there should be enough left to give you a substantial down payment on another classic car, if that's what you want. The money mattered less to me than the acknowledgement behind it, the concrete admission that they had wronged me and were committed to making it right. Brooke's journey was more complicated. After facing potential felony charges for the credit card fraud, she'd accepted a plea deal that included financial restitution, community service, and mandatory therapy. The legal consequences had been a harsh wake-up call, stripping away her ability to manipulate the narrative. I'm doing the work, she told me during one of our cautious coffee meetings supervised by her therapist as part of her recovery program. I don't expect you to believe me or forgive me right away. But I want you to know I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. Her therapy had revealed deep-seated insecurities and a pathological need for attention that had driven her manipulative behavior. While this didn't excuse her actions, it helped explain the desperate lengths she had gone to for validation and resources. The therapist says, I used material things to fill an emotional void, she explained, her voice lacking the performative quality I'd grown so accustomed to. I honestly thought if I just had the right car, the right clothes, the right wedding, I'd finally feel enough. I didn't offer easy forgiveness that would have been dishonest. Instead, I acknowledged her efforts while maintaining the healthy boundaries I'd finally established. Actions will matter more than words, I told her. I'm willing to see where this goes, but trust is earned, not given. Marcus surprisingly had not disappeared from our lives. After the initial shock and anger he had chosen to cautiously re-engage with, Brooke attending therapy sessions with her and establishing clear parameters for rebuilding trust. I love who she could be, he confided in me during an unexpected lunch meeting. I'm not naive anymore about who she has been. But her willingness to face consequences and do the hard work of changing, that's worth something to me. Their relationship status remained ambiguous, not engaged, but not entirely separate either. They were dating again with the watchful eyes of therapists and family members, ensuring that old patterns didn't resurface. As for me, the settlement from my parents had provided enough capital to launch the business I'd been dreaming of for years, a classic car restoration shop specializing in American muscle cars from the 1960s and 70s. I leased a garage space near my grandfather's old house, purchased equipment, and opened Callahan Classics with a small business loan, supplementing my parents' restitution payment. The ultimate symbol of my new beginning came in the form of another 1967 Mustang, this one in far worse condition than my original had been. I found it at an estate sale, 2 counties over, its once gleaming body now rusted and dented, its engine seized from years of neglect. You sure about this one? Uncle Frank asked as we loaded it onto a trailer. It's going to take twice the work of your last project. I ran my hand along the rusted fender. I'm sure. There's something fitting about starting over with a bigger challenge. The work of restoring the car became a metaphor for rebuilding my life and my family relationships, a process requiring patience, honesty, and the willingness to discard parts too damaged to salvage, while carefully preserving what could be saved. 6 months after the confrontation, my parents visited my workshop to see the Mustang's progress. The car was on a lift, its undercarriage exposed as I worked on the suspension. "It's coming along," Dad observed, running his hand along the partially restored quarter panel. "Not the same as the blue one, but it has potential." "Different," I agreed, "but maybe better in the end. I'm doing some modifications I didn't try last time." Mom, who had been quiet during the inspection, suddenly spoke up. "We let you down, Avery. For your entire life we let you down." The blunt acknowledgement hung in the air between us. "Yes," I said finally. "You did. We can't undo it," Dad added, his voice thick with emotion. "But we're committed to doing better from here on out. Equal treatment, equal respect, equal love. If you'll give us the chance to prove it." I thought about my grandfather's wisdom about cars, how the ones worth saving weren't always the prettiest, or the ones in best condition, but the ones with good bones and potential for restoration. "Relationships are like these old cars," I said, gesturing to the Mustang. "Sometimes you have to strip everything down to the frame and start over. It's harder than starting fresh with something new, but there's value in the history, even the painful parts." We didn't hug or make dramatic declarations of forgiveness. Instead, we stood together in my workshop, 3 people, acknowledging the difficult restoration work ahead of us, both on the car and on our family bonds. 2 weeks later, I was working late at the shop when an unexpected visitor arrived. Grandpa Harold's old friend Tony stopped by with a small wooden box. "Found this while cleaning out my garage," he explained. "Your grandpa left it with me years ago. Said to give it to you when you had your own shop." Inside the box was a set of rare vintage tools specifically designed for Mustang restoration, along with a handwritten note in my grandfather's familiar scrawl. "For Avery, who understands that the most valuable restorations require both patience and courage. Some things worth fixing take time." I wiped away unexpected tears as I held the tools my grandfather had saved for me, long before he knew I'd need them both for cars and for rebuilding the family. He had always seen more clearly than anyone. That evening, as I worked on my new Mustang with my grandfather's tools, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The betrayal of my car being sold had led to painful but necessary truth. The family facade had shattered, but from the broken pieces, something more authentic was emerging. It wasn't perfect restoration, never is, but it was real. And that's how I finally broke the cycle of being the family doormat and found my own version of justice. Has anyone else experienced family karma coming full circle? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stop enabling harmful patterns. Until next time.